This was a fascinating day exploring Old Jerusalem. We left the hotel at 8 o'clock in the morning and drove from West Jerusalem to the north onto Mount Scopus. From the Mount of Olives, we looked on perhaps the most viewed scene on earth, Jerusalem and the eastern wall of the city. We sat down in a quiet corner of the Jewish cemetery, which dates back to the 2nd century BC. It is the biggest Jewish cemetery in the world, with over 70,000 graves. It was a popular place to be buried, especially for wealthy Jewish families, because the soft limestone was easy to dig, and there was a tradition that the resurrection of the dead would begin here. These tombs have a little door where a candle is lit, and the tradition is that once a year, on the anniversary of the death, the family gather at the tomb to pray, and visitors also place a stone whenever they visit the tomb. The present walls of Jerusalem were built by Solomon the Magnificent in 1563. Some the same as the old city walls, and some new. The eastern wall, for example, couldn't be anywhere else, but the Golden Gate through which Jesus entered was walled up by the Turks, who didn't like the idea of 70,000 newly resurrected Jews marching in. They also placed a Muslim cemetery outside this gate, because the Jews will not walk over a grave. But this is the gate through which the Messiah is expected to enter Jerusalem. The southern wall now excludes Mount Zion, which was previously within the city wall. The city of David, however, was outside the wall on lower ground, and cited there because it was previously the Jebusite city that he conquered, and also the only water source for Jerusalem. The El-Aqsa Mosque is the third most holy place to the Muslims. El-Aqsa is the name given to Jerusalem in the Quran, meaning the farmost or on the edge. The dome of the rock covers the place where Abraham was prepared to sacrifice Isaac. It was bought by the Hashemites of Jordan and built in 691. The tiles of the walls came from Kashmir, and the golden dome made from 84 kilograms of gold, paid for by King Hussein of Jordan. On the side of the Mount of Olives, facing Jerusalem, were two churches, one to commemorate the place where Jesus wept, Jesus Flevit, and one to Mary Magdalene. We walked down the hill to the Garden of Gethsemane, Gat Shamin, meaning olive press, which was once a centre for the oil industry of Jerusalem. We learned that not only do olive trees live for thousands of years, but if you cut one down, a new tree will come forth from its stump. Hence Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1. We saw the path Jesus would have taken from Mount Zion down the Kidron Valley on that Passover night, not allowed to walk more than 1 kilometre on the Sabbath, to the deserted garden where he used to pray. Beside the garden is the Church of All Nations, named after the 16 Catholic nations that donated money for it to be built from 1919 to 1925 by Antonio Baluzzi on the site of an old Byzantine church, erected by Helena over the so-called Rock of Agony, where Jesus prayed. The windows are made of alabaster, giving a purple light into the church that enhances the heavy atmosphere. Many people focus on Jesus' agony in the garden, but it was faith-strengthening to stand in the place where he battled in prayer to be completely reconciled to his Father's will and for the joy that was set before him. There we sang a song of praise before rejoining our bus and continuing to the bullet-scarred Zion Gate, where we entered the walled city. Through the Zion Gate, we entered the Jewish quarter of the old city. Then we walked past the Church of the Dormition, where the mother of Jesus is supposed to have died, to the complex of buildings that houses the tomb of David on the ground floor and the upper room where the Last Supper was celebrated. King David was originally buried in the city of David, according to 1 Kings 2, outside the city wall. The building above, known as the Cenaculum, dates back to the Crusader period and is the traditional site for the upper room that became a regular meeting place for the first disciples. The disciples met there regularly following Jesus' ascension, and it was here that the early church received the Holy Spirit on the day of Pentecost. We then walked along the narrow lanes to the main Roman street that ran from east to west through the old city, the Cardo, or Hart Road, complete with its sewage system. Here we saw it mapped out on a 6th century mosaic discovered in Madaba in Jordan in 1884, depicting how the city would have looked in Roman times. In places we could see excavations showing Crusader buildings above the Cardo, and in places the old Hasmonean wall beneath the Cardo. We saw in a glass case a golden menorah made by the Temple Institute, awaiting the day when the temple will be rebuilt.